It was July 2005 when Eric and Lara Thompson, a young adventurous couple from Bristol, England, embarked on what was supposed to be the highlight of their climbing lives, a multi-day ascent of the Mont Blanc Massif in the French Alps. Known for its dramatic peaks and unpredictable weather, the route was not for beginners. But Eric and Lara weren't amateurs. They had conquered Kilimanjaro, trekked across Patagonia, and even summited parts of the Himalayas. To them, Mont Blanc was a challenge but not a threat. The couple arrived at the Chamonix Lodge with high spirits and logged their plan with local authorities as required. Nothing seemed out of place until it was. 5 days later, when the couple failed to check back in at their scheduled time, concern began to rise. A routine delay wasn't unheard of in mountain climbing, but after 48 hours of silence and no signs of descent, rescue teams were dispatched. Helicopters scanned the ridges. Climbers and dogs swept through common avalanche zones. The route the couple had marked was clear, but not a single trace of them was found. Not a dropped glove. Not a single footprint in the snow. Not even their last known camp. It was as if they'd been erased from the mountain. The search went on for over 2 weeks, drawing in professional mountaineers, search dogs, and even military drones, but it was fruitless. Weather worsened. Snowfall covered old paths. The Alps, as majestic as they are cruel, had seemingly swallowed the couple whole. The French authorities, reluctantly, called off the active search. The case was labeled as a presumed climbing accident. The Thompsons were declared missing and presumed dead, but there was something strange about how clean the disappearance had been. Too clean. Back in England, friends and family were baffled. Lara had been texting her sister every evening during their earlier climbs, but her last message sent 2 days before they vanished it out. It read, "Eric's not sleeping. Says someone is watching our camp at night." That detail alone shook her family. Who was watching them? Other climbers had been scarce on the route that week due to sudden snowfall. Authorities dismissed it as nerves, but to Lara's sister, it was a cry for help that came too late, adding more unease to the mystery. Investigators found that Eric had left behind a cryptic journal in their apartment, with an entry dated just before the trip. "If anything happens to us, it won't be weather. Look deeper." The handwriting was his. But what did he mean? Was he paranoid? Was someone following them? Had they stumbled upon something they weren't supposed to see in the mountains? These questions would remain buried in the next 20 years. In the months following Eric and Lara's disappearance, the climbing community and online sleuths alike found themselves gripped by the eerie silence surrounding the case. It wasn't just another tragic accident in the mountains. Something about the couple's vanishing didn't add up. People couldn't shake the feeling that the answers weren't buried in the snow, but rather hidden in plain sight. Conspiracy forums lit up with speculation. Podcasts began dissecting the timeline, and locals who'd stayed silent began whispering things they hadn't shared during the original investigation. Among the most talked about theories was that the couple had stumbled onto something secret, something someone didn't want found. Some claimed they might have witnessed illegal activity in the mountains, a hidden smuggling route, off-the-record military operations, or even clandestine research stations. A French climber posted anonymously in a forum that he'd once seen armed men in white uniforms near the same route the Thompsons had taken. His post was taken down within hours, but not before screenshots spread across Reddit. Suddenly, the case wasn't just tragic, it was chilling. Then came the resurfacing of Eric's strange journal entry. "If anything happens to us, it won't be weather. Look deeper." Investigators had dismissed it as the ramblings of a man with high-altitude anxiety, but online detectives didn't. A Reddit user pointed out that Mont Blanc had a history of strange disappearances. Couples, solo climbers, and even experienced guides had vanished in that same area since the 1960s. But most of those cases had one thing in common: none of the bodies were ever recovered. Lara's last text to her sister also fed the flames. The idea that someone was watching them unsettled even seasoned mountaineers. Who was out there on those remote slopes, miles away from the nearest human settlement? Some theorized it was a serial killer who used the Alps as a dumping ground, moving undetected through the icy terrain. Others were convinced it was something more supernatural. Ghost stories emerged about the Mont Blanc Watcher, a shadowy figure seen near camps before tragedies struck. Locals had dismissed the legend for years, but now, people were listening. Despite mounting pressure, the French authorities refused to reopen the case, citing lack of new evidence. But that didn't stop amateur investigators. Entire YouTube channels popped up, analyzing the route, the couple's gear, and even the weather patterns of that week. A few journalists tried to dig deeper, but one was abruptly reassigned, and another reported being followed after visiting the area. What was it about the Thompsons' disappearance that made some people uncomfortable? What secret were they possibly silenced for? As questions piled up, the truth seemed to retreat further into the shadows, waiting. It wasn't until nearly 5 years later, long after the world had stopped searching, that the first potential clue emerged from the icy grip of Mont Blanc. A solo hiker named Julien Moreau was exploring an unmarked ridge in early spring 2010, when he noticed something strange partially embedded in a glacial runoff stream. At first, it looked like nothing more than a chunk of dark fabric, but as he brushed away the ice and snow, he uncovered a faded scarf bright red, unmistakably out of place in the otherwise white-blue wilderness. It was frayed, but intact. Wrapped tightly within it was something even more unexpected, a frozen Polaroid photograph, its image just barely preserved by the cold. When the photo was thawed and enhanced by authorities, what it revealed shocked everyone. It was a snapshot of Eric and Lara, clearly taken during their final climb. They were both smiling, standing in front of their tent. But between them stood a third person. His face was turned slightly, as if caught off guard, and he wore no identifiable gear, no backpack, no climbing tools, no lodge ID tag. No one, not even the families, could identify the man. He wasn't mentioned in any of the lodge sign-in records. Nor was he present in any of the Thompsons' other photos, posted online. Before their trip, it was as though this man had simply appeared beside them, and vanished just as quickly. Authorities were skeptical. Some suggested the photo might be old, perhaps taken on a previous trip and frozen by coincidence. But digital analysts confirmed the camera model was consistent with the one the couple had brought on their final climb, and, chillingly, the date written on the back of the photo was July 13, 2005. The very day before they vanished. The French police, under pressure from the public, quietly reopened the file, but the investigation remained frustratingly stagnant. No new evidence surfaced, and the man in the photo became known only as the unknown climber. Internet sleuths went into overdrive. Dozens of theories emerged. Some believed the man was a guide, hired off the books possibly for a secret route through the Alps. Others were convinced he wasn't a climber at all. A few users claimed he resembled a man who had been seen wandering the Chamonix region that same summer, asking strange questions about disconnected zones. One chilling post even suggested the man was part of a disbanded Cold War-era research group known to operate in the Alps under the guise of geological studies. While none of these claims were ever verified, they only served to deepen the legend surrounding the Thompsons' disappearance. Even more disturbing was the condition of the scarf. Forensic experts concluded it had been torn, not cut roughly, and possibly during a struggle. Small blood traces were detected on one edge, but there wasn't enough DNA to identify a source. Yet, despite this apparent clue, no additional items were found in the surrounding area. No camp remains. No clothing. No journal. The photo, the scarf, and the rumors were all that remained. But something about that man, his posture, his presence in the photo, his complete anonymity left a stain of unease that no snowfall could bury. After the discovery of the mysterious photo, attention turned back to Chamonix, the last place Eric and Lara were seen alive. As journalists and amateur investigators returned to the small alpine village, something peculiar happened. People began to talk. Quietly at first, and only in hushed tones. Locals who had been tight-lipped for years started to share unsettling anecdotes. A former innkeeper admitted he remembered Eric and Lara vaguely, but also remembered something else. A tall man in dark hiking gear watching the couple from a distance the night before they departed. The man never spoke, never approached. Just stood near the tree line as if he was waiting. Or listening. The stories grew stranger. A retired mountain guide known only as John Paul spoke to an independent podcaster about an old trail that used to run adjacent to the one Eric and Lara had marked in their route. The path wasn't on modern maps anymore, and hadn't been maintained since the 1980s. Jean Paul claimed it led to a now sealed tunnel once used by climbers during winter storms. But he also said something darker. The tunnel had a reputation. Over the years, several hikers who entered it didn't return. Some say strange sounds echoed from it at night. Others claimed they'd seen figures near the entrance, motionless and silent. The area, locals whispered, had long been considered cursed. The whispers took an even more disturbing turn when talk of an old mountaineering group began to surface. They were known only as Les Disparus, the Vanished. Some believed it was an urban legend, a secret society of climbers who had forsaken the modern world, choosing to live in isolation deep within the Alps. Others, however, claimed it was real. One bartender at a local lodge remembered Lara asking vague questions about off-grid shelters and places where you can disappear completely. At the time, it seemed like casual curiosity. Now, it felt more like foreshadowing. Was it possible the couple had encountered Les Disparus or, worse, tried to join them? Adding to the unease, several of Eric and Lara's old social media posts were reanalyzed. In a now-deleted comment under one of their pre-climb photos, Lara replied to a friend's joke with, "If we're not back, maybe we found something better up there." At the time, it was brushed off as a lighthearted remark, but in hindsight, many wondered if she meant something more. What exactly did they hope to find? Or who? Some speculated they had been in contact with someone, a guide, perhaps, who promised them a new experience far from the beaten path. And if that's true, then the man in the Polaroid may not have been a stranger at all, despite the growing noise online. Local officials remained oddly silent. When one foreign reporter tried to track down Jean-Paul for a follow-up interview, he was told the old guide had abruptly left town without notice. His cabin was found locked, and his phone disconnected. And the tunnel he mentioned. A small team of amateur explorers who tried to find it claimed their GPS malfunctioned in the area, and that they felt watched the entire time. They turned back before reaching their goal. Whatever secrets Mont Blanc was hiding, it seemed determined to keep them buried beneath ice, silence, and fear. In early spring of 2025, after one of the warmest winters on record, the French Alps experienced a dramatic shift in weather. Weeks of freezing storms were suddenly followed by a burst of sun and unseasonable warmth. The snowpack, unstable and saturated, finally gave way. A massive avalanche thundered down the Mont Blanc range, roar heard as far as the valley villages below. What started as a natural disaster would soon become an unexpected key to a mystery buried in ice for 2 decades. Rescue teams were dispatched not to look for survivors, but to assess the damage. None of them expected what they would find. 3 days into the operation, near an area known as the Dead Hollow, a spot far from marked trails, a group of climbers helping with the search stumbled upon a torn tent corner poking through the melting snow. Thinking it belonged to a recent camper, they dug it out. What they unearthed was chilling. A tent, yellowed and brittle with age, half collapsed and buried under layers of packed ice. Inside, frozen in time, were 2 rusted climbing harnesses, a partially shattered camera, and a small metal box filled with water-damaged papers. Just meters away, partially exposed by the avalanche's fury, were human remains. DNA testing would later confirm what the climbing world had long suspected. The remains belonged to Eric and Lara Thompson, but the condition and positioning of the bodies raised far more questions than it answered. Eric's body was found upright, his arms above his head, as if clawing toward the surface. His gloves were missing, and the tips of his fingers were shattered. It looked as if he had been buried alive, frozen mid-struggle. Lara's remains were found 50 meters away, partially curled, with her face turned toward the slope, as if watching something or someone. What shocked investigators even more was the fact that the tent and equipment had been intact until the avalanche unearthed them. The area had been thoroughly searched back in 2005, but no trace of this camp had been reported. Was it possible the tent had been hidden under a pocket of solid ice, untouched by search teams? Or had it been moved there more recently? And if so, by whom? The items inside the tent were oddly preserved. A journal Lara had kept was missing pages, some torn, others burned. The camera, although broken, still had its memory card lodged. Inside. Authorities treated the discovery as a cold case breakthrough, but the few people allowed to see the recovered site, local rangers, forensic analysts, and high-ranking officials, left visibly disturbed. They spoke little to the press. One ranger was overheard whispering to a colleague, "That camp wasn't destroyed, it was abandoned." In a hurry. Rumors began swirling again, stronger, louder, and harder to ignore. Had the couple been trying to escape something that night? Had they been caught? And why were their remains in such different locations, in such unnatural positions? For the first time in 20 years, it felt like the mountain had spoken, but not clearly enough. Amid the debris recovered from the long-buried tent was a battered, frost-bitten DSLR camera. Its exterior was cracked, and its lens was shattered, likely from years of compression under ice. At first, no one thought it would yield anything useful. Moisture had seeped into the body, and corrosion lined the battery compartment. But by some twist of fate, or perhaps something more chilling, the memory card inside was still intact. Forensic technicians rushed to retrieve any data, hoping for even a single image that could shed light on Eric and Lara's final moments. What they recovered was far beyond anything they expected. Only one photo had survived the years of ice and decay. The rest were corrupted, scrambled fragments of light and shadow. But that single image was disturbingly clear. It showed Eric Thompson, sitting on a rock just outside the tent. His face was gaunt and pale, his lips cracked, and his eyes wide with a look of unfiltered terror. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't posing. He was frozen in a moment of panic, staring directly into the camera. And more than that, he was pointing at something just out of frame. Something or someone behind whoever had taken the picture. Investigators zoomed in, analyzing every corner of the image. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But then someone noticed the reflection. In Eric's sunglasses, there, distorted and faint, was a dark silhouette, humanoid in shape, but wrong. It was tall, standing unnaturally straight, its outline hazy as if cloaked in mist. It lacked definition, no facial features, no gear, no colors. Just a shadow, standing motionless behind the camera. Authorities refused to publicly comment on the image, but several insiders leaked details online. One technician reportedly quit her job after viewing the full-resolution version of the photo. She told a colleague, that thing wasn't just watching them, it was waiting. Even more disturbing was the timestamp embedded in the file's metadata. It was dated July 15, 2005, 2 days after Eric and Lara were supposed to have disappeared. That meant one of two things. Either the couple had survived longer than anyone thought, or someone else had the camera after they vanished. And if the latter was true, who took the photo? Lara, a stranger, or was it something else entirely? Digital experts tried to reverse engineer the data, but found that some fields had been deliberately wiped, almost as if someone or something didn't want the origin traceable. As word of the photo began to spread beyond official channels, fear and fascination exploded online. Forums lit up with theories ranging from government cover-ups to supernatural entities native to the Alps. A popular thread claimed the silhouette matched ancient folklore from the region, legends of a mountain spirit called Derbiobacter, the Watcher. Others believed the photo was faked, a cruel hoax staged to reignite interest in a closed case. But those who had seen the original image insisted it was real. Too real. And if that's true, then the camera hadn't just survived the cold, it had carried a warning, one that still hadn't been understood. Just when the investigation appeared to have reached its long-awaited resolution, something happened that shattered the fragile sense of closure. It began quietly, almost like a whisper. The Chamonix Lodge, the very one where Eric and Lara had stayed the night before their fateful climb, received an envelope in the mail. It arrived with no name, no return address, no postage stamps. The only marking was a single red wax seal, pressed into the back, unmarked by symbols. The lodge manager, a woman who had worked there for over 2 decades, initially thought it was some elaborate hoax. Until she saw what was inside. The envelope contained a hand-drawn map of the Mont Blanc region. But it wasn't an ordinary trail map. It was old, weathered, yellowing at the edges, and it marked places that no longer appeared on any modern chart. Most curiously, it pointed to a specific area, nearly 10 miles from where Eric and Lara's bodies had been discovered. At the center of the map was a crude red X, hand-drawn in the snow-covered wilderness, near what appeared to be a dead glacier. Scrawled beneath the map, in shaky handwriting, were 6 words that froze the blood of everyone who read them. You found the bodies, not the truth. Authorities were baffled. How did someone know about the location of the bodies before it was ever released to the public? That information had been tightly controlled, revealed only to a handful of officials and experts. Even more unsettling, the handwriting in the letter bore a haunting resemblance to Eric Thompson's journal entries. Experts couldn't confirm it with absolute certainty, but the possibility that Eric himself had written the note even posthumously sent chills through the investigative team. Was it possible he'd written it before his death, anticipating the discovery, or had someone else forged it to send a message? In response, a small team of rangers, forensic specialists, and 2 journalists ventured to the area marked on the map. What they found was confusing. There was no shelter, no signs of human activity, but there were strange anomalies. All of their GPS devices malfunctioned within 100 meters of the marked location. Compass needles spun erratically. One drone launched to survey the terrain crashed minutes later, its footage corrupted beyond recovery. The air, several team members said, felt wrong. One ranger, a skeptic by nature, later admitted that he had the overwhelming sense they were being watched, not by an animal, but by something that knew they were intruding. Shortly after, the investigation was abruptly closed again quietly and without fanfare. The lead forensic officer was reassigned. The journalists involved in the expedition went dark, refusing interviews. A local newspaper ran a single paragraph mentioning the map but never followed up. Online, speculation reignited with fury. Was the French government hiding something buried deep in the Alps? Had Eric and Lara uncovered something they were never meant to see? Or had they become part of something not entirely human? One thing was certain: whatever the avalanche revealed, that spring, it hadn't been the full truth. And maybe the mountain wasn't done speaking yet. So now, nearly 2 decades after Eric and Lara Thompson vanished into the heart of Mont Blanc, we're left with fragments, bones in the snow, a single haunting photo, a hand-drawn map from nowhere, and a shadow that refuses to fade. The mountains gave us the bodies, but not the answers. Were they victims of a tragic accident? Witnesses to something forbidden? Or did they discover a truth so terrifying that someone or something made sure it stayed hidden? One thing is certain: whatever happened up there didn't end with the avalanche. And if you're thinking of climbing Mont Blanc, take one final piece of advice. Some trails were never meant to be found, and some shadows never melt with the snow.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.